Is applique trendy right now? I genuinely don't know, because my algorithms are very specific. So I'm not doing this exploration because applique is trendy, but also I probably am doing it because applique is trendy, simply because I have seen so many people lately trying various kinds of applique, and of course that makes me go, yes, must try that myself, yay. That felt very convoluted. We're gonna try applique! I love an unscientific exploration. I love a good old compare and contrast. If you've been around the channel for a while, you know this about me. So I really want to try every single type of applique there is, but like many things within the world of craft and making, and very especially the worlds of textile and fiber arts, there are some varied opinions here. It seems most people agree that there are 3 overall categories of applique, which, for those of you who might be unfamiliar with the term altogether, is basically applying a piece of fabric on top of another piece of fabric to like create a design. That's the definition I'm going with, at least. So 3 main categories: machine sewn, hand sewn, and fused. Then when you start to get into the subcategories within those categories, it all starts to get rather muddy. So if I miss a technique that you know about while making this video, please tell me about it in the comments and maybe I will try it in a future video. No promises though. It seems the most logical to start with the easiest thing, aka the one that actually doesn't really require sewing, and that would be fused applique. Fused applique uses a 2-sided fusible web or adhesive like these that sticks fabric to other fabric. This is not something I normally have in my stock, so I got whatever the craft store had to offer on an impromptu trip last night. There are a bunch of different kinds, but you're typically looking for the words like 2-sided, permanent, good for applique. If the instructions are visible on the packaging, you can read through those to make sure that this one is going to adhere on both sides, because there's a lot of one-sided interfacing out there. Then you just follow the instructions to stick the fusing first onto your decorative piece of fabric and then onto your backing fabric. This one just sticks on like a straight up glue or sticker, while this one uses the iron to heat the piece into sticking. This third one uses the iron and wetness. Like, you need steam, and they say to use a damp cloth and stuff. All of them stuck pretty decently well. I tried a couple thinner fabrics and more complex shapes with these two, and I don't love how this one told you to tuck the extra adhesive underneath around the edges. It kind of just makes them wonky and not great looking, so I'd recommend just cutting the piece down to the proper size before peeling off the backing. This one looks better, but you do need like a waist piece of fabric to put underneath if you don't cut the paper down to size first, because otherwise all of that will end up on your ironing board. Not good. And this could technically be enough, you know? It's stuck on here. It's all good. In theory. I don't think any of these would be super long lasting though, especially if you're frequently washing your applique, if it's on clothing, if it's getting a lot of wear and tear. So to my knowledge, fused applique is rarely done on its own. I think this is more commonly used to like put patches on something, especially something like a backpack or a fanny pack that's not really going through the wash a lot. But I think fused applique is more commonly combined. It's really kind of the first step, because this is a really good way to stick your pieces down so they're not moving around while you sew over them, especially if you're sewing over them with a machine. But before we get that machine out and move on to stitched applique methods, you wouldn't happen to be feeling snackish, would you? Well, I hope you are, because Snackish is the sponsor of today's video. Y'all know I love food. I love a good snack, and potato chips are definitely a favorite. Who doesn't love a potato chip? Hello? Do you love a potato chip? But I don't actually buy them much, because they're one of those foods that's so enjoyable to eat, but the second that I stop eating them, I just feel kind of greasy and gross. Snackish potato chips have all of that delicious potato chip flavor and crunch without leaving a coating of grease on your fingers. They're just plain good, like eat the whole bag good. I'm gonna end up eating the whole bag while filming this because I'm snacking between every line. You're welcome to people who hate it for cutting out all the crunching. The Snackish line of potato chips includes 6 delicious flavors for all your snacky cravings, and not only are they of course plant-based and dairy-free, but they're also made with 100% avocado oil. Good source of fiber, good source of protein, good source of rejuvenation in the middle of a long crafting project. You can grab a bag of Snackish potato chips at eatsnackish.com, which I have linked in the description, or you can find them at Target or Amazon. Thank you to Snackish for sponsoring this video, and now let's get on with the applique exploration. Now, I should note that some of these adhesives are not for sewing over. Like, the directions specifically say, do not sew over them. I'm assuming because the glue is so thick that it'll clog up your machine and make a mess. So trust them when they say that, don't sew over those. This one should be fine to sew over though, so I've stuck down my design, didn't even bother ironing it because it lightly sticks without any heat and we don't need the adhesive to be permanent since we're now gonna sew them down. This is called raw edge applique because, you guessed it, you're so smart, these raw edges are just hanging out there. This is a really simple way to do applique as long as you don't mind that, rougher look. The edges will start to fray with time and especially if you wash it. Not a bad thing, it's a super cute look, and they're unlikely to ever fray past the stitch line. On that note, the stitching itself is a little more straightforward and simple with this method because it's just your regular straight machine stitch. Mine's set on 2 as the length, if that helps at all. First sample down, yay! Another option for machine sewn applique is to use zigzag stitcher on the edges. So on this one, I've again used the 2-sided fusing, but I'm gonna stick them on one at a time and sew around each piece separately. My zigzag stitch is set on 5 as the length and 1 as the distance. I'm also changing thread colors with each piece so that they match, but you could totally use a neutral thread or even a contrast thread for the whole thing and call it a design choice. These are so freaking cute. Y'all, this is fun. Okay, so I saw this style called smooth edge applique, but only once, so I don't know if that's like a legit name. But now we're gonna crank that zigzag stitch length all the way down to 0, which means you're gonna have to kind of pull on the fabric to get it to move at all. We're aiming for a completely filled in line of stitching around that entire edge, enclosing the whole thing. This is very typical of what you'd get on an actual embroidery machine, but it is totally doable on a regular machine too, if a little finicky at times. I wouldn't recommend starting with a lot of tight curves and angles, like I did for some reason. But you can also use that satin stitch for additional stitch lines, like the lines on the pumpkin and the vines. Oh, and I should note that I didn't use the 2-sided interfacing on this one. I was all like, nah, I'll just use regular interfacing, 1-sided. It'll stiffen it up a little bit, but not actually stick it down, and that'll be fine. It probably would have been better to use the 2-sided stuff. And by probably, I mean definitely. This one was the most difficult. Doing that tight satin stitch really pulls the fabric together. So one, you want to use like some pretty stiff interfacing on the backing fabric as well. I was like, oh, this fabric is pretty thick. It should be fine. But yeah, I think you need like all of your fabrics, even if it's a wash away interfacing, you need all of them to be pretty dang stiff while you're sewing. And I definitely think having these actually stuck down rather than just loose would have helped. Ironing made it look a little bit better, but yeah, there's just wrinkles everywhere. I also didn't have like the green and the orange thread that went well with it. These are very bright in comparison to the fabric colors, which is fine. We're just testing things. It's still pretty cute. I just like my pencil and my watermelon a lot more. I think this style is my favorite. The looser or wider, I guess, zigzag stitch around it. This is so fun. I have one more that I want to try on the machine, and then I am very much itching to get to the hand versions. Yay. My machine has a bunch of decorative stitches on it. A lot of machines do, not necessarily every single one of them. Some have like just your straight and your zigzag. I got a bunch of little decorative decorative stitches on this machine. So I thought it would be really fun to do some applique using those stitches. I wasn't sure what to do, and I asked Matt, and he didn't know what applique was. And after I explained it to him, he said, do a cactus. And I thought that was a great idea. So we're doing a cactus. I again have used the one-sided interfacing on all this, so nothing is stuck down. It's just a little bit stiffer. But I did at least put it on my backing fabric. I thought a cactus was perfect though, because I have some that are like very kind of sticky outy stitches, and it'll be like they're the spines, so I'm gonna sew like all over the cactus. I guess we do need to do this flower first though, actually, because it's behind, and then this flower last. Have I mentioned that I'm having quite a bit of fun with this? My mom loved to do applique. She did a bunch of applique on stuff, specifically like the machine sewn, but smooth edge, I guess it's called. What I just did on the pumpkin, only she did it much, much better. I should get some fabric to test this on. That's cute. Ooh, that's pretty cool. I like it. Anyway, my mom was a really experienced sewist, and she sewed like a lot of our clothing, pretty much our entire lives. But then, you know, you reach a point where all of your kids are now of an age where they're like, Mom, please stop sewing our clothing. We just want to wear jeans. So inevitably, that day came. But when that happened, she started sewing these absolutely adorable little fluffy dresses for little kids. And this is something that she had wanted to do for a really long time. She full on wanted to have a brand. Her name for the brand was Under the Shade Tree. And she wanted it to be boutique little children's clothing that she designed and sewed herself. We got to the stage of like taking photos of all of them. I think we tried to sell some on Etsy, and this was back when like Etsy was brand new. Oh God, the days. If I can find the photos, I'll throw some up. But yeah, a lot of them featured applique on the front. I remember like a cow on one. I don't know, she would match the fabric and the designs were just adorable. I do think her eventual dream was to actually have, you know, like a brick and mortar boutique little shop, even though, I don't know, I think she was also aware that that wasn't likely a business that would succeed. I mean, nowadays I'm much more aware of it than I was back then. But, you know, hand making clothing that are each one of a kind and trying to sell them in a physical location where people have to come to you and you have to pay rent. Difficult. Quite difficult. Oh yeah, now I wanted to, I want to do some like things coming out of the center of the flowers. Worth it to change thread. But yeah, she was still homeschooling 3 or 4 of us at the time. Like, she still had a lot going on in her life. So I was really trying to help her get this started and like go places with it, but in the end it never really did. She kind of just made a lot of inventory, which makes sense because that's what she enjoyed, was making the stuff, not necessarily selling it. Gee, that's something I understand. When she passed away, we just had an entire closet full of these dresses, every single one of them unique, absolutely adorable. I think several of my siblings are still storing them to this day, but we do like give them out. All the nieces in the family have had one. I was able to give one to my daughter, so it is really special. Anyway, I guess all of that is to say that applique is kinda in my blood, and also I think the decorative stitching is my new favorite. Look how frickin' cute this is. Ugh, I love it. Let's do more. Yay! For the cactus, I did a zigzag across the bottom in green to start, and then switched to a tan thread and used this stitch around the outside and this stitch for the spines down the center, doing that thing where you pull the excess thread through to the back and tie a knot so that you don't have to backstitch. I love how every decorative stitch has its own rhythm while you're sewing it. They're very fun to use. And oh goodness gracious, this is my new favorite. It's so freaking cute and pretty and fun. Eee! Solid day's work, y'all. Good morning. I am so excited to keep going with this in case I haven't said so. I'm having so much fun. I'm pretty sure I've said so. Today we take on all of the hand applique methods. So last night I prepped several pieces here. This is the one we're gonna be using for raw edge applique. It's little ants, yay! And I wanted to take this opportunity to test out something that people tell me to try all the time, which is glue stick. Everyone says that you can just glue your pieces down with glue stick, and if you put that final piece in the wash or even just like hand wash it in the sink, the glue will come out. I think it'll also probably just like dry over time and be not sticky. I don't love interacting with glue, so I've never tried this before. Mostly my concern is that when you're pulling a needle through it, you will be able to feel that stickiness. It'll get on the needle itself and become gross. But let's try it, y'all, because these ants have some really little pieces on here that would benefit from being already stuck to the fabric, but I don't really want them to be stiffened with stiffening. Interfacing. I've slept since then. As predicted, I did not enjoy the sensation of touching glue, but also as predicted, this absolutely worked. Nothing's moving around, and now I can stitch through and around the pieces with much more ease. No pins hanging out trying to stab me. You commonly see blanket stitch used on raw edges, so I'll do that on the larger sections, but since these legs and antennae are so small, I'm just gonna do a teeny tiny running stitch straight down the center of each. With tiny pieces like this, you definitely risk a lot more fraying. Like, so much fraying, the piece might eventually disappear. And I think the direction you cut out small pieces, as in with the grain or against the grain or on the bias, can affect how much they fray. So that's a good thing to take into consideration. I did not do that, but that's okay. Well, bam! Ants on a picnic blanket. Now we move on to turned edge applique. Yep, for the first time we are flipping those edges under to protect them, and I'm going to use the pre-ironing method on this one, so I cut out my desired pieces out of one-sided iron-on interfacing first. I can now iron them onto the appropriate fabrics, and then cut those fabrics down to shape with some seam allowance all around the edges. That seam allowance can then be turned and pressed down with some clipping to help us out, because I did so many curved edges here. It's a little persnickety, but it will make the stitching much less persnickety because those edges are pre-turned and ready to go. And another handy benefit of hand applique is that I'm using embroidery floss to stitch, so I have way more color selection at my fingertips than I did in the realm of sewing thread. You could absolutely use whatever stitch type you want here that will hold it down. It's common to see an invisible stitch used on turned edge, like a slip stitch or a ladder stitch, but you can do blanket stitch, whip stitch, back stitch, or running stitch slightly inside the edge. There's no rules here. Do whatever floats your little crafty boat. New favorite? I don't know. I think it's tying with the cactus for top spot. I really like this one. Okay, our next turned edge hand-stitched applique style gets its own name, needle-turned applique. This is because, I bet you already figured it out, you turn the edges under with your needle as you stitch. You're taking all that persnickety ironing stuff and replacing it with the persnickety stitching stuff, which honestly, I'm totally into. I did, however, give myself a very tall order here. This pie applique not only starts out with a scalloped edge that definitely isn't needle turn 101, like we're at least on 102 with that, but also I'm apparently going to figure out how to turn under and stitch down a wavy lattice top. How? Seriously, how? Please don't ask me to explain, I didn't film any of it. Well, okay, I didn't really needle turn, I just used a diabolical number of pins. Didn't stab myself though. Between the hand stitching, the like hidden slip stitch style, and the needle turning, this was definitely the slowest method so far, but honestly, I had quite a nice time stitching it. Took me pretty much all of yesterday, along with a few like errands and household chores. I don't know that I would recommend that you try a latticed work pie top, but if you love a slow stitching project, this is definitely the method that I would tell you to go for. Those were kind of the main hand-stitched applique styles, but y'all, you think we're done? We're not done. There's still a few more methods that I want to try. Felt applique. This is typically hand-stitched, but it's essentially just doing applique with felt. The names are very self-explanatory here. I'm not actually gonna try this one in this video because guess what? This entire mosaic dress is felt applique. Yeah, I've already done quite a bit of it. The difference between this and other fabrics is just that felt does not fray on the edges, so it's kind of all raw edge, but you don't have to worry about the edges. You can stitch it down however you want. It's a really simple and kind of more straightforward method. And then technically there's like decorative hand-stitched applique, but we did decorative stitch on the machine, so I feel like we've covered that. You could do turned edge on the machine, but we did it hand-stitched. I think we've covered most of our bases, but there are still 3 more types of applique that I want to try. Dimensional applique. Applique that rises from the surface in some way, shape, or form. I have prepared a fried egg. Also, I know that I haven't been showing like the cutting out process or the design phase, I guess you could call it, but it literally is just futzing around. You can draw out your design first on paper and cut out patterns. You can literally trace shapes off of images. You can just freehand cut into the fabric, which is pretty much what I've been doing. If you mess up a piece, you toss it in the scrap bin, try again. Very low stakes, quite enjoyable. For the egg white, I cut out a piece of this poly batting stuff that I already had in the same shape as the fabric, but a little bit smaller. And then I'm essentially doing a very futzy needle turn method to stitch it down. It was pretty finicky to get started, mostly just me sticking my head in front of the camera, but once I stopped filming it and could stick my head wherever I wanted, it did get easier. Funny how that works. For the yoke, there's this method of pre-turning the edges for circles. You cut out a piece of cardboard the size you want the final circle, the fabric piece should be bigger, and then you run a gathering stitch all around the edge, stick the cardboard in the center, and pull tight. You could, and probably should, iron it before then removing the cardboard and stitching the circle down, but I didn't feel like turning on the iron, and have I mentioned that me and Sir Finicky go way back? We're besties. Before I finished the full circle, I stuffed the yolk with some batting scraps for extra poofiness, and ta-da! Kinda wonky, could definitely use some work, but hey, still pretty dang cute, right? Our next applique exploration is in reverse. We've got another name that tells it all. Instead of cutting out a shape from a piece of fabric and sewing it down to a backing fabric, for reverse applique, you lay a whole piece of fabric on top of another and then cut out shapes where you want the backing fabric to show through. I decided to go absolutely nuts here and do a triple layered thing. Ooh! I was gonna also do turned edge, and then I realized that the shapes I had chosen were rather pointy in rather a lot of places, which would make cutting them out with seam allowance and turning that under kinda a pain in the patootie. So I'm gonna do raw edge instead. That means I can just cut along my lines, stack up my pieces and secure them together, and then stitch. What's the point of doing reverse applique instead of regular applique? Does it really look all that different? Is it kind of just more complicated for no real reason? These are questions you may be asking yourself, and if so, stop asking so many questions and go do some stitching. I've been following some incredible artisans on Instagram that inspired this whole exploration to start with, so this design is very much inspired by Made of Cloth. I love the way they use the simple straight stitches to hold down their applique and add a bit of texture. Ooh, it's so good. Ugh, love it. Speaking of specific inspiration, this last applique style was inspired by the incredible work of, I hope I'm saying this right, Giage.co on Instagram. Now, I don't know if this method has a name, nor do I know if this is actually how they do their beautiful, often monochrome floral pieces, but I thought it was an interesting way to take care of your edges and allow a bit more flexibility when attaching the pieces to the backing. I've cut out a bunch of petal and leaf shapes here, quite randomly and without any guidance, and each one is 2 layers. I'm gonna sew them together on the machine, the way that you would sew a pillow cover, leaving a small hole so that I can then turn them right side out and iron them with those raw edges enclosed inside. Let's just skip to all of these being done, shall we? Ta-da! I actually got Matt to help me turn all of these right side out while we were watching TV, and he turned out to be shockingly good at it. Now we can arrange the pieces however we want, and rearrange them, and rearrange them. You can play around. I played around for quite a while before I found a positioning that I liked, and then we stitch it all down. I was originally going to turn under all the edges and make sure the seams were hidden and only the top piece of fabric was visible while I stitched these pieces down, but I ended up really liking the seams slipping up here and there. It feels very organic. I'm using the invisible slip stitch method again, but you could totally do this with any stitch you please. The fun part about these pieces being double layered and sewn closed with neat edges is, first of all, that you get this raised and sort of lumpy texture that I find absolutely delightful, but most of all, you don't have to stitch all of it down. If you want to wrinkle pieces up, fold them over, leave the tips unconnected, bunch them, layer them, just tack down one place and let them hang off, all of that works really well because your pieces are double-sided and you don't have any raw edges to worry about. I had so much fun making all the fun and bright and cutesy appliques we made already, but I am so happy that I tried this sort of classy monochrome style too. It's gorgeous. Y'all, that was such a blast. I was never not having fun during this entire process. Even the frickin' pie. I was still having fun! I cannot make a whole video about applique though and not mention the inspiration to top it all, Brittany from Risk Thrift. Their work is fabulous. It's so bright and fun and silly. They typically applique on thrifted clothing, so it just brings a whole new life to these articles of clothing. God, they're just such a bright light over on Instagram. If you are not already following them, you don't already know about their work, highly recommend checking out Risk Thrift. If this video has not already inspired you to do some applique, they sure will. And seriously, try some applique. Try it. I think that this works for like anyone and everyone, no matter what your creativity style is, no matter what your project desires are. It's so versatile. Cute or classy, simple or complex, monochrome or very colorful, really slow or pretty dang quick. All of those things are possible within the overall applique world, you know? I mean, if you have any clothing or pillows or like, I don't know, a tablecloth that you want to spice up, this is the perfect way. And you don't have to be good at illustration or drawing either. Like, I think that can often be the thing that stops a lot of people up, is like, I don't know how to draw that thing. Clearly, you can do really simple shapes that are very easy to draw. I think everybody can draw a fried egg. I certainly hope you can. But also, you could just legit trace off of images. You could take an actual picture of like your dog or something and then just trace the different shapes that are there. And you also don't have to do illustration. You don't have to do an image. You could do abstract shapes. You could do designs, get all artsy with it. In fact, I am incredibly tempted right now to start a very massive and long-term applique project where I take all of my fabric scraps, like the little ones from years of sewing, and I just cut random shapes out of them and hand applique those onto a large piece of fabric for however long that takes. Yeah, I might have to do that soon.